1958, Borehamwood Studios, England, a film set. The cameras were rolling. Sean Connery, 27 years old, barely known, was filming a love scene with Lana Turner. They were on a couch, embracing, rehearsing their lines. Just another day on set, another scene, another take. And then the door burst open. A man walked in, thick-set, powerfully built, wearing a lime green suit and lizard shoes, a heavy gold bracelet on his wrist with Lanita inscribed inside. His name was Johnny Stompanato. Ex-Marine, mob enforcer, bodyguard to Mickey Cohen, one of the most dangerous gangsters in Los Angeles. And he had a gun. He walked straight onto the set, past the crew, past the cameras, straight to where Sean and Lana were sitting. He didn't say a word, just pointed the gun, right at Sean Connery's head. And then he spoke, his voice low, dangerous. "Take your hands off her." The set went silent. Everyone froze. This wasn't a movie. This wasn't a scene. This was real. A real mobster, a real gun, and a real threat. But Sean Connery didn't freeze. He didn't beg, didn't negotiate, didn't back down. Instead, he did something that would become Hollywood legend. Something that would make the mob respect him and fear him for the rest of his life. He grabbed Johnny Stompanato's wrist, twisted it, hard, until the gun dropped. And then he punched him. One hit, clean, powerful. Johnny Stompanato, the man who'd beaten women and intimidated gangsters, went down like a sack of bricks. Sean picked up the gun, looked at Johnny on the floor, and said, "Get off my set." That was it. That was the moment Sean Connery stopped being just an actor and became a legend. But what happened next? What happened in the weeks and months that followed that confrontation? That's the part of the story that haunted Sean for decades. That's the part that turned him from a fearless young man into someone who looked over his shoulder for the rest of his life. Because Johnny Stompanato didn't forget, the mob doesn't forget. And 6 weeks later, Johnny Stompanato was dead, stabbed by a 14-year-old girl, Lana Turner's daughter, and the mob blamed Sean Connery. Let's go back. To understand what happened on that film set, you need to understand who Johnny Stompanato was and why he showed up with a gun in the first place. Johnny Stompanato was born in 1925 in Illinois. Italian-American, grew up poor, joined the Marines, served in World War II, and when he came back, he drifted into the underworld, became a bodyguard, an enforcer, the kind of man who solved problems with his fists, or worse. By the 1950s, he was working for Mickey Cohen, one of the most powerful mob bosses in LA. Cohen ran everything: gambling, extortion, murder, and Johnny Stompanato was his right-hand man, his muscle. The guy who made sure people paid, the guy who made sure people stayed quiet. But Johnny had a weakness: women. Specifically, famous women. He loved the glamour, the attention, the status that came with dating a Hollywood star. And in 1957, he met Lana Turner. Lana Turner was one of the biggest actresses in the world, the sweater girl, a pin-up icon. She'd been nominated for an Oscar, made dozens of films, was beautiful, famous, everything Johnny wanted. And they started dating. But it wasn't love. It was obsession. Johnny was jealous, paranoid, controlling. He'd fly into rages over nothing, hit Lana, threaten her, isolate her. And Lana, trapped in the relationship, couldn't escape. Because Johnny Stompanato wasn't just her boyfriend. He was dangerous, connected, and if she tried to leave, she didn't know what he'd do. Then in 1957, Lana got a job, a British film called another time, another place. She'd be working in England for a few months, away from Johnny, away from Los Angeles, away from the mob. It was her chance to breathe, to think, to maybe find a way out. And her co-star? A young Scottish actor named Sean Connery. Unknown, charming, tall, handsome, the kind of man who made women feel safe, made them laugh, made them forget about their problems. Sean and Lana got along well, maybe too well. The tabloids started running rumors. Are Lana Turner and Sean Connery having an affair? Hollywood sweater girl falls for unknown Scot. The rumors were everywhere, and Johnny Stompanato back in Los Angeles was reading every word. He called Lana, demanded to know if it was true. She denied it, said it was just work, just acting. But Johnny didn't believe her. His jealousy consumed him, and he made a decision. He was going to England, to see for himself, to confront Sean Connery, to make sure everyone knew Lana belonged to him. Lana begged him not to come, told him to stay away from the set, that it would cause trouble, that it wasn't worth it. But Johnny didn't listen. He boarded a plane, flew to London, and showed up at the studio. It was a cold afternoon when he arrived. The crew was shooting a scene, Sean and Lana on a couch. Intimate, close, exactly the kind of scene that would drive Johnny insane. He watched from the doorway, fists clenched, jaw tight. And then he couldn't take it anymore. He walked onto the set. The crew didn't stop him. They thought he was part of the production, someone important. And by the time anyone realized he wasn't supposed to be there, it was too late. He pulled out the gun, a pistol, small but deadly, pointed it at Sean Connery's head, and the words came out like venom. "Take your hands off her." Sean looked up, saw the gun, saw Johnny's face twisted with rage, and in that moment, he had a choice. He could freeze, could beg, could do what most people would do when a mobster points a gun at them. Or he could fight. Sean Connery chose to fight. He moved fast, grabbed Johnny's wrist, twisted it with the kind of strength that comes from years of manual labor and bodybuilding. The gun dropped, clattered to the floor, and before Johnny could react, Sean's fist connected with his jaw. One punch, clean, brutal. Johnny Stompanato went down. The crew stood there in shock. Lana screamed. Someone called the police. And Sean, calm as ever, picked up the gun, looked at Johnny lying on the floor, and said the words that would echo through Hollywood for decades. "Get off my set." Scotland Yard arrived, arrested Johnny Stompanato, charged him with breaking England's gun laws, and a week later he was deported, sent back to the United States, humiliated, beaten, by a 27-year-old actor who wasn't even famous yet. But here's what Sean didn't know. Here's what nobody knew. Johnny Stompanato wasn't done. The mob doesn't forget. The mob doesn't forgive. And Johnny was already planning his revenge. He was going to make Sean Connery pay, one way or another. But he never got the chance. 6 weeks later, on April 4th, 1958, Johnny Stompanato was dead. It happened in Lana Turner's home in Beverly Hills. Johnny had come over. They'd been fighting. Lana wanted to end the relationship, told him to leave, to get out of her life. But Johnny wouldn't go. He grabbed her, slapped her, threatened to kill her, to disfigure her face so no one would ever want her again. Lana's daughter, Cheryl Crane, 14 years old, heard the screaming from her bedroom, heard her mother crying, begging, and she grabbed a knife from the kitchen, ran into the bedroom, and when Johnny turned toward her, she plunged it into his stomach. Johnny Stompanato looked down at the knife, looked at the girl, and his last words were, "What are you doing?" And then he collapsed, bled out on Lana Turner's bedroom floor, dead at 32. The trial was a sensation, headlines everywhere. Lana Turner's daughter kills gangster. Justifiable homicide. Cheryl was cleared. The jury ruled she'd acted in self-defense, but the mob didn't see it that way. Mickey Cohen, Johnny's boss, was furious. He didn't believe the story. Thought Lana had killed Johnny herself, or worse, thought it was somehow connected to Sean Connery, to the rumors, to the affair that may or may not have happened, and he wanted revenge. Sean Connery, meanwhile, was in Los Angeles, filming Darby O'Gill and the Little People. For Disney, living at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, just starting his career, just trying to make a name for himself. And then he got a phone call. It was Mickey Cohen. The voice on the other end was cold, calm, dangerous. "You cost me a friend. You're going to pay." Sean hung up, didn't argue, didn't defend himself, just hung up, because he knew. He knew what Mickey Cohen was capable of. He knew what happened to people who crossed the mob, and he knew he was in danger. So Sean Connery did something he'd never done before. He ran, packed his bags, left the hotel, and went into hiding. For months, he stayed in the San Fernando Valley, laying low, avoiding public places, looking over his shoulder everywhere he went, because he didn't know if Mickey Cohen had sent someone, didn't know if there was a contract on his head, didn't know if every stranger on the street was the one who'd pull the trigger. Years later, in an interview, Sean said, "I didn't know what I was dealing with, and I didn't see any point in discussing it, so I hid until it blew over." But did it blow over? Did the mob really forgive him? Or did they just decide he wasn't worth the trouble? We'll never know, because Sean Connery never talked about it again, never mentioned Johnny Stompanato by name, never told the full story of what happened that day on the set. And when he died in 2020, he took whatever fear he'd carried with him to the grave. But here's what we do know. After that confrontation, after Johnny Stompanato's death, after months of hiding, Sean Connery was never the same. He became more cautious, more private, more guarded. He built walls around himself that even his family couldn't penetrate. And when he was cast as James Bond a few years later, people said he was perfect for the role. Cool, unflappable, fearless. But those who knew the truth understood. Sean Connery wasn't acting. He'd already faced a real mobster, already had a gun pointed at his head, already punched a gangster in the face and lived to tell about it. Bond wasn't a stretch. Bond was just Sean being Sean. And the mob? They never forgot. For the rest of Sean's life, there were rumors, whispers, that Mickey Cohen had put out a hit, that the contract was still open, that Sean Connery was a marked man. Maybe it was true, maybe it wasn't. But Sean believed it, and that belief shaped everything he did, every choice he made, every person he trusted. Because once you stand up to the mob, you can never really relax. You can never really feel safe. You're always looking over your shoulder, always wondering if today's the day, if this stranger is the one, if this moment is your last. Sean Connery lived with that for 62 years, from 1958 until his death in 2020. And maybe that's why he played Bond so well. Maybe that's why he understood danger, understood fear, understood what it meant to stare death in the face and keep walking, because he'd done it, for real. On a film set in England, when a mobster pointed a gun at his head, And Sean Connery, 27 years old, unknown, with nothing to lose, grabbed that gun and punched the man holding it. One moment, one choice, one punch. That changed everything. That made him a legend. That earned him the respect of the mob. And that haunted him for the rest of his life. They say courage is acting despite fear. But real courage? Real courage is living with the consequences. Living with the knowledge that you made powerful enemies. That you're never really safe. That the past never really dies. Sean Connery had that courage, and he paid for it. Every single day, for 62 years. Until October 31st, 2020, when he finally stopped looking over his shoulder. Because death had finally caught up. Not from a mobster's bullet, but from old age. In his sleep. Peacefully. But even then, even in those final moments, do you think he remembered? Do you think he saw Johnny Stompanato's face? The gun pointed at his head? The choice he made to fight instead of freeze? We'll never know. But one thing's certain. Sean Connery never regretted it, never apologized, never backed down. Because that's who he was. A man who stood his ground. A man who faced the mob. A man who became Bond not by acting, but by living.